Hey, greetings. I'm so glad you decided to join me. Let's get started. We'll start with a quick outline of what you're about to learn in this course. Before we start, I want you to understand that in this course, just like any other course I teach, my objective is not to just simply teach you a career, but to first and foremost help you wake up and realize who you are, who you really are, to help you awaken the divine presence within you. By doing this, I'm hopeful that you can finally wake up and realize the hidden powers that are dormant within you, not for your own sake, but for the sake of helping humanity. Is my explanation clear? If not, or if your goals are not in line with my vision, with these values, then this course is probably not the right fit for you. Second, a number of my students in this course will likely be Reiki masters. Just like you, they too are looking for a more advanced understanding of the art and secrets of healing. As you know, these days you can easily learn the fundamentals of Reiki by taking a simple online course. You can literally watch an hour or two of video instructions and get your certificate as a Reiki master all in the same day. But that's not how this course works. Yes, you can watch all the videos in this course in one day too, but you won't be able to master the concepts and make them come alive at your fingertips all in the same day. True, we're all learning. Each one of us is at a different stage of learning in life. Some students are brand new to these concepts. Some have already discovered some of their hidden powers, and yet others stand at one point or another, somewhere in between. But even those who have utterly developed some of their inner powers still need to work on these concepts and techniques in order to master them. For some, this mastery may present itself in just days. For others, well, it may take weeks, months, years, or even a lifetime. Regardless, wherever you stand on the spectrum, you need a starting point. And this course is a perfect launching pad for you to discover your true inner self and the hidden powers that are dormant within you. In this course, I will show you objective means of testing your true understanding and mastery of the concepts and techniques of the art of avatar therapy or energy healing. Here's how we'll proceed. To begin with, the first thing you'll learn in this lecture series is the principle of do no harm. Here's the point. Once you learn these techniques and start helping others, as you earn more clients and more fans, a time will come when popularity and profits can make you blind. That's when you need to remember your humble beginnings. You need to remember who you are and why you chose to do this. You're not here to learn how to start a profitable gig. Although this venture may be very profitable, I'm hopeful that you've set your sights on something much more heroic and more noble, like changing this world for the better and making a difference in people's lives. Ultimately, you're not here to experiment on your clients, right? You're here to learn and apply the sacred art and science of health and healing, not only for yourself, but more importantly, for the sake of helping humanity, right? The next thing we'll discuss is how in today's medicine, for the purpose of healing, science divides a human being into two inseparable elements, right? The mind and the body, correct? But this linear view is inadequate and incomplete. Why? Because you can easily see the consequences of such shallow and superficial way of thinking. Just take a look around yourself. You can see it for yourself. Don't you see how even though healthcare is growing so enormously, we're still not any healthier? In fact, we're facing an ever-growing epidemic of obesity, heart disease, and cancer, aren't we? This is what happens when you stop questioning things and let others, scientists or not, decide what's right and what's not. The truth is that, holistically speaking, humans are fourfold in nature, not twofold. We have a physical body, right? We also have an energy body, which directs the flow of the life force. Some cultures call this life force prana or chi. We have a soul, which some call the astral body or the child within. And we also have a mind, which is also known as the ego or the higher self. Understanding these four inseparable human elements is key to discovering the healing powers within you. We'll describe each one of these elements separately, and then we'll discuss the key elements that play a role in the art of avatar therapy or energy healing. Next, we'll discover the tools and techniques that will help you to mobilize the life force for the purpose of healing. I will teach you the art and science of avatar therapy or energy healing, regardless of whether you're doing it in person with your client in front of you or from a distance. You'll learn that sometimes when you have a physical ailment, you may not be able to find the source of the illness in the body at all. In fact, I'm sure most of you are not doctors or nurses or in healthcare at all. You may not even remember anything about human anatomy or physiology from school. But by using the knowledge and techniques I will teach you in this course, you will not only be able to bring about a state of health and well-being, but also objectively observe the obvious signs of improvement and recovery in your clients. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Hey, welcome back. So let us start from square one. What is energy healing? Before we go any further, one thing you should know right from the start is that by applying the art of avatar therapy or energy healing, we're not by any means competing with Western medicine. We're in fact adding a new dimension, a highly complementary element to it. The truth is that we're adding an enhanced measure of potency to it. Why? Because number one, we're adding back an increasingly forgotten factor in the art of health and healing. That's the transformative power of human-human interaction. Each human being is endowed with an inherent healing force. And when we allow this force, this healing force, to flow freely, we can not only heal others, but also ourselves. This is in sharp contrast to the direction we are headed in traditional medicine today. Humans are not numbers. We're not animal subjects. Not everything can be healed with pills or drugs, right? Not everything is necessarily healed by using guidelines and protocols, the way it's rightly done in the emergency room today. Don't you agree? And number two, in avatar healing, we are mobilizing one of the most powerful forces available to human beings here on Earth. We are mobilizing the life force and guiding it along the span of the body or body parts that are hurting or ailing. By introducing the science and art of avatar therapy, we are adding a significant measure of inner force a significant measure of healing power to the practice and promise of medicine. This course is not about magic or esoteric charlatanry. It's about reintroducing an ancient form of healing that's been adapted to meet the needs of the modern human being. It's about reintroducing a long forgotten art of healing that significantly enhances and perfectly balances the traditional art of modern medicine. Avatar therapy or energy healing, when done correctly, is a science that is becoming ever more crucial and necessary, especially as we go forward and discover new means of therapy in the scientific art of health and healing. The results and outcomes of healing strategies in this course can be easily measured and proven alongside the traditional means. Go look in the literature. You can already see a number of studies that have successfully evaluated energy healing. In fact, some hospitals now offer it as a form of complementary medicine, especially when it comes to chronic diseases and conditions like cancer. What's important to understand, though, is that when it comes to health and healing, each treatment modality has its own time and place. Here's an example. If you have an accident and break your arm or have internal bleeding and lose consciousness, no amount of energy healing can help you at that moment. You need to go to the emergency room and see a doctor or surgeon. If you can't understand this concept, then this course is probably not for you. When someone's hurting, an energy healer may not necessarily know what tissues or organs are involved, but by applying the methods I teach in this course, she can transform that injury or illness and bring about a perfect state of health and well-being in that patient from the inside out. In practical terms, an energy healer approaches the problem not by focusing on the disease, not by focusing on cells or tissues, but by creating a shift. A shift in what? A shift in the direction and the pattern of flow of the life force. Whether you are sick or not, the life force constantly circulates through your body. It streams in and around your body. It's the life force that revitalizes and rejuvenates the body. When it comes to an injury or a disease, this flow, this pattern has taken a wrong turn and become completely buckled or disfigured. By disrupting that distorted flow or flawed pattern, the energy healer gives the body a renewed opportunity to heal itself from the inside out. Get it? And here we come face to face with a shocking truth. That is, the very name of this healing modality, energy healing, is actually a misnomer. The idea of using energy to heal a disease or injury is nothing but a myth. The truth is that this form of healing does not, by any means, involve the flow of energy at all. You spend energy by exerting yourself, but the medium of healing itself is not energy. It's the life force. What's crazy is that this life force is not bound by the laws of matter and energy, but its effects can ultimately be seen in terms of matter and energy. This is easily verifiable. You can try to measure the amount of energy, for example, that is supposedly passed on when the healer is at work, but you won't find even a trace of measurable transmitted energy. You can measure energy in the healer's hand, but you can't document any form of transmission from one person to another. This also holds true for Reiki and other similar healing modalities. Wild, isn't it? every living physical organism here on Earth, including those of plants and animals, has a matrix, a framework, an archetype, a molding. The visible physical substance that fills this matrix is the cells, tissues, and organs, the water and the minerals, or the meat, skin, and bones in case of a human body. This framework, this archetype, is composed of focal centers and conduits, or channels, that run throughout the body. This matrix concentrates the life force in time and space and allows it to run through these centers in order to manifest life here on Earth. Again, this holds true not only for humans, but also for animals and plant kingdom. When someone dies, this matrix, this archetype, rapidly deteriorates and the physical body disintegrates. Because the matrix, the molding that held things together and housed the life force, is no longer there. In different cultures, this matrix was known by different names. Some called it the life body or etheric body. Others called it the energy body or subtle body. In this lecture series, I call it the avatar. We will discuss this topic in more detail in another lecture a bit later. But for now, this is what I want you to take away from this lecture. When an injury or disease takes hold of the body, this archetype, this avatar, becomes disfigured in the area of the injury or disease. And as a result, the flow of the life force becomes distorted. If this impairment is significant enough, the problem can become disabling or even fatal. What the healer actually does then is to attempt to, number one, restore the matrix or archetype of the diseased or injured body back to normal. And number two, restore the natural flow of the life force. This will allow the life force to once again flow freely within the body. If this is done correctly, with enough skill and patience, it will restore the health and vitality of the body. In a crude way, this work of restoring the molding or archetype is what the surgeon actually does when she puts the broken bones back together or removes the tumor. This is an attempt to allow the body to heal itself by removing or correcting the injury or defect. When the energy healer and the surgeon come together and work on the patient as a team, the pace of recovery accelerates and the results are dramatically improved. In some cases, especially when the injury or disease is not life-threatening or urgent, an adept healer can readily take care of the problem without any medical intervention. But when it's significant, trying to restore the matrix can be quite challenging or even impossible for the average healer. That's why it always makes sense to bring these two systems of healing, the traditional Western medicine and the energy healing, together whenever possible. How do I know? Because as a surgeon, I read studies and I know that combining these two systems is highly effective. The strange part is that you don't even have to know how avatar therapy works. You just do the techniques and create significant life-altering results. As a budding healer, as you slowly learn to manipulate the matrix and guide the flow of the life force, you will become increasingly proficient and more effective over time. Eventually, you may become so effective that someday you may be able to free yourself or your clients from the need to use medications. But don't make a mistake. This thing takes a lot of effort and personal sacrifice. Once again, in some cases, the problem may be so deeply rooted, or the body may be so irreversibly damaged, that a drug-free life may not be an option. but the healer can still greatly enhance the quality of life, especially in the long run. Because energy healing or avatar therapy is a process that works from the inside out, by nature, it's a gradual and slow process. But the results are often lasting and permanent. The change does not happen overnight. There's no magic pill. It takes time and effort. But when the healing takes place, the sense of fulfillment and satisfaction is like nothing you've ever felt before in your life. At last, now that you know the truth, we will no longer refer to this mode of healing as energy healing. The correct term is avatar healing, and that's how we'll refer to it from here on. One last thing. This lecture right here, the one we're in right now, is the foundation of the whole course. We'll build on this foundation as we go forward. So don't just sit back and passively watch or listen or read. If you don't really understand this lecture, you won't be able to understand the rest. So go back again and watch it, listen to it, or read it if you're reading a book. Do it over and over again until you are sure you are comfortable with these concepts. We'll stop right here and move on to the next lecture. Let's go. Hey, welcome to the third lecture. As with any of my other courses, if you're learning to be a healer, I need you to go through a small and intimate journey with me. This is where I want you to participate in an oath ceremony. You can think of this module as the initiation ceremony before you start the program. Yes, you need to be initiated. You are embarking on a journey to become a healer. Whether you are a seasoned healer or not, you should know that being a true healer comes with immense responsibilities. And unless you are ready to accept them, you have no place in this sacred profession. First, a little disclaimer on my part. To begin with, you should know that even though I'm a physician and surgeon, in this lecture series, I do not, by any means, pretend to provide professional advice or services to you, the individual viewer, listener, or reader. I cannot possibly see you or examine you or your clients from my end, right? So I cannot, by any means, provide an individualized diagnosis, prognosis, or treatment plan for you or your clients. If you or your clients have a medical problem, you need to see a physician or specialist. So by going forward, you agree that I'm not liable for any damages that may allegedly arise from the ideas, techniques, or suggestions I mention in this course. Healing others is a noble undertaking. It requires extremely high morals and ideals. I think when it comes to being a healer, honesty and transparency are necessary and essential. And you'll need to strongly commit to these values and ideals. So today, I want you to begin by making a commitment to do no harm. That's the commitment I made on my first day in medical school, even before I attended my first lecture as a medical student. I took an oath to do no harm. The day I was given my first white coat, I was obliged to take the Hippocratic Oath, an oath of ethics to keep confidentiality and do no harm. Don't take this lightly. This is a colossal challenge. I still face this challenge every day. Every time I'm in charge of a patient, even before I see the patient, I ask myself, how can I avoid causing harm? How can I give love and serve without overstepping my boundaries and causing harm? If you truly believe that this is the path for you, then I will need you to take a moment and take an oath right here with me. Even if you've taken this oath in the past, I want you to do it again. I want you to refresh your memory and renew your commitment right now. You can pause this video and restart it when you're ready. Just make sure you're in a quiet room, free of distractions. We'll do a modified healer's oath. Okay, pause now and click on play when you're ready. Okay, we're back. Are you ready? Here's what I want you to do. Place your right hand on your heart and repeat after me. I swear by my inner spirit, making it my witness, that I will carry out, according to my ability and judgment, this oath and covenant. I will use my knowledge and art of healing to help humanity to the best of my ability and judgment, but never with a view to cause harm or for the sole purpose of earning money. I will keep both my life and knowledge of healing art pure, ethical, and holy. I will not be ashamed to say I don't know. I will abstain from all intentional wrongdoing and harm. I will abstain from abusing the minds and bodies of men and women who have placed their trust in me. As a healer, I will help the sick whenever I can. But more importantly, I will aim to prevent fear and superstition. For this is always preferable to a cure. If I carry out this covenant and break it not, may I gain reputation for my life and for my art. But if I break it and forswear myself, may the world forgive me not. Congratulations, you are now sworn in. Now let's get started. In the next couple of lectures, we'll discuss the true anatomy of a human being. We'll cover the individual components of a fourfold human being. If you have already learned these concepts in my earlier lectures or other courses, don't shortchange yourself by skipping these lectures. I'm sure you will find new information that is specifically related to avatar therapy. So stay with me. Let's go. Greetings. We're now getting ready to roll up our sleeves. But before we learn the tools of the trade, we need to make sure everyone's on the same page, right? As you know, the art of healing can take many different forms or shapes, and there are no rules, really, except for human kindness, compassion, and moral decency, right? Sometimes just a kind word or a caring touch or even a simple hug can heal a broken spirit or a wounded heart. But when it comes to energy healing, or more accurately, avatar healing, before we can truly heal anyone, we need to know a bit more about the anatomy and physiology of a human being. And I don't mean the anatomy and physiology learned in school, but a more holistic, a more complete picture of a true human being. As I mentioned earlier in this lecture series, as you may know from my other lectures or courses, on Earth, a human being is made up of at least 4 essential components, 4 integrated elements that make up the essential building blocks of a human constitution. These elements are essentially necessary for human life here on Earth. These elements are like sheaths, like coverings that enshrine the most sacred essence within us. In English, this essence is called the spirit. This spirit is the backbone of everything visible and invisible in this vast universe. The ancients believed that everything you see here on Earth and the vast heavens, including the stars, galaxies, and the nebulae, everything operates on the backbone of individualized spirits. They believed in sun spirits, the spirits of water, fire, wind, and so on. In myths and legends, these collective spirits had names. The ancients believed that their ancestors could actually communicate with these spirits. They prayed to these spirits by name and asked for assistance with their problems, diseases, or even activities of daily living. The idea was that within the womb of an all-encompassing spirit, there are individual spirits that are higher than man, and that these spirits are advanced enough to be able to help human beings here on Earth. At one point on the path of their evolution, these individualized spirits were humans, but they completed their human evolution on a different plane. They did not need our planet, the planet Earth, to complete their human evolution the way we do. So they never needed a physical body in order to exist. Today, these higher spirits still exist, but owing to the turning point we are going through on our evolutionary path, they are no longer allowed to intervene in man's affairs. So the idea is that humans are individualized spirits, but on a much lower level on their evolutionary path as compared to the spirits our ancestors relied on in far distant past. Here, let me give you a visual representation of what this all means. Imagine hypothetically that the ripple up top is a representation of all that exists here in this universe, both visible and invisible. Now imagine the drop below it to be the depiction of a minute, individualized expression of all that exists. This is the individualized spirit. Get it? This individualized spirit can be the backbone of a star, a planetary system, or a human being here on Earth. In order for this individualized spirit to express itself here on Earth, it needs some form of clothing, some form of covering. The same way a deep-sea diver needs an adequate diving suit in order to take the plunge and explore the bottom of the oceans. This diving suit, per se, is made up of indivisible components, components that must necessarily blend together in order to provide the means for a human being to exist here on Earth. These components or elements include a physical body, a matrix, also known as a subtle body or energy body, which is the seat of the life force. In this course, in this lecture series, I call it the avatar. A soul, which is also known as the desire body or astral body. Here, I call it the werewolf. And a mind, also known as the ego or higher self. In this lecture series, I call it the demigod. This breakdown is well described in a number of sacred books. You can also find it in plain language in many of Rudolf Steiner's more than 6,000 books, notes, and lectures. You can also find similar descriptions in different cultures and mystery traditions around the world. As I said, every visible form of life here on Earth possesses these four elements. This includes the plants, animals, humans, as well as microscopic creatures like bacteria or even viruses. The main difference between these living beings is the way they possess these elements. This determines their level of autonomy and conscious experience. For example, humans experience a vivid, self-conscious awareness. The animals experience a consciousness that is more like a dream state consciousness. And the plants live in a sort of sleep state consciousness. Get it? Let me give you an analogy to explain things a bit better. Under ordinary circumstances, we all have a home, right? I may live in a community housing, for example, like a dormitory, and share the bathroom, kitchen, and living room, like in college, right? You may live in an apartment and have your own privacy, but not own the building. Others may live in cooperative buildings or condominiums, and still others may live in tents, boats, or single-family housing units where they own their own shelter outright. Each one has a certain level of autonomy and control over his or her dwelling. The more autonomy and control you have, the more accountability and responsibility you bear. In the realm of the kingdoms of life, this autonomy and control translates into a self-conscious experience. Minerals and rocks, for example, in the mineral kingdom, use all four components of earthly existence. The four coverings we talked about, but the physical body or form is the only element they possess on their own. They share the rest of these elements with our planet, with planet Earth. Therefore, the mineral kingdom has very little autonomy and self-control. Get it? They have no self-conscious experience. They are not conscious. They're asleep. They are static. They're in a state of deep sleep. In plants, both the physical form and the avatar are self-contained. They don't share these elements with their surroundings. Therefore, since the avatar is the seat of the life force is able to actively flow through each single plant. As a result, plants are capable of nourishment, growth, and reproduction. The plant has a life of its own. It grows. That's what the life force does. It nourishes you and gives you the ability to reproduce and grow. In animals, the physical form, the avatar, and the werewolf are all self-contained. With the addition of the werewolf or the soul, animals are not only able to grow, but also experience pleasure and pain. They have instincts, desires, and passions. That's what the werewolf does. It gives you the ability to feel pleasure and pain, to have instincts, desires, and passions. On Earth, humans are the only living beings that contain our four elements within them. They are wholly self-contained and complete. That is, they have a physical form, an avatar, a werewolf or soul, and a demigod or a higher self. The demigod gives humans the ability to become completely self-conscious. That is, unlike animals, humans have a clear day consciousness. They are conscious of themselves and their surroundings. With this privilege, they're able to choose right from wrong, be creative, and decide their own fate. No other creature on this planet can do this. This makes humans the crown jewel of creation here on Earth. All right, does this all make sense? Don't just sit there and passively watch or listen or read. If these concepts are new to you, don't just move on to the next lecture. Go back and review this lecture over and over again. Review the slides and teaching guides again and again if you have to. As I said earlier, you can't just go through this entire course all in one day and expect to become an expert overnight. The average student won't even absorb more than 10% of the stuff in one pass. Don't just passively move on to the next lecture. Do your homework. You're here to learn and apply yourself, aren't you? You want to be a well-trusted healer, healing expert, right? You want others to place their trust in you, don't you? Then don't cut corners. A time will come when a patient in desperate need of help will put her trust and faith in you. Will you be able to morally live up to that challenge? No one will fault you for being overly committed. This knowledge is key to understanding the rest of this course and enhancing your spiritual and healing practice. Don't take it lightly. If you're a true seeker, you will do whatever it takes to get a good grasp of this ancient knowledge. Okay, so let's delve a bit deeper. Let's talk about each one of these elements individually. Let's go. Hey there, welcome back. So here, we're going to talk about the first two components of the fourfold human constitution, the physical body and the avatar. It's strange to say, but if you've had any doubts by now, you should certainly know that humans are spiritual beings, right? We're not physical machines or physical organisms. Humans are individualized expressions of a larger cosmos, right? We are individualized spirits roaming about on Earth in order to gain experience, in order to someday become gods, and by doing so, add to the wisdom of the cosmos. In the last lecture, I said that humans are completely self-contained beings, individualized spirits with 4 inseparable or indivisible coverings or sheaths that allow them to consciously roam about here on Earth and freely choose, plan, and create. We also said that no creature on Earth is endowed with this privilege. We said that these 4 inseparable elements or sheaths are the physical body, the avatar, the werewolf, and the demigod. Now we're going to add more clarity by demystifying a few of the pieces of this complex puzzle. What should be obvious by now is that we humans are spiritual beings who are clothed with both physical and non-physical sheaths or elements here on Earth. The first 2 sheaths, the physical body and the avatar, are physical in nature, made up of earthly stuff like minerals, gases, and particles. And the last 2 are non-physical or extraterrestrial. To simplify things in this lecture series, let's call the physical body the first layer of the fourfold human being. This is obviously the visible layer, right? The layer with meat, skin, and bones. It's the body everyone can feel, touch, and see. It's delicate and perishable. Do you agree? It's also the least flexible and the hardest to change, right? You can't just undo an injury or disease at will, can you? You can't just look better, lose weight, or become fit instantly at will, can you? It takes time and effort, doesn't it? Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, sometimes you will never achieve your ultimate goal. That's just how it works with the physical body, right? Or is it? In fact, when you start something, like an exercise routine or a diet, or even a course of therapy, the physical body is the last sheath or layer to show any signs of recovery or change. This is key to understanding the concept of healing, especially avatar healing. In energy healing, the process of healing begins immediately upon initiating the therapy. But depending on the severity of the injury or disease, sometimes the results may not even be visible for days or even weeks or months. That's why would-be healers who are novice or untrained lose focus and let go, because they don't see immediate results. They dabble a little here and a little there, but soon lose interest and move on, thinking that it was all just a hoax. We'll discuss this in more detail later. The second physical element or layer of a human being is the avatar. Just like the physical body, this layer is made up of the stuff of the earth. It's an earthly sheath, but just like gases, like the invisible elements that extend beyond the circumference of our planet, like its atmosphere, the human avatar is invisible to the naked eye, but it's there. Just like the atmospheric halo you see around our planet from a distance, the ancients, the seers, could see a slightly raised halo or a slightly inflated sheath around the physical body. That's why the ancients called this layer the subtle body, or the body of the life force, or the etheric body, not to be confused with the ether in science, by the way. Today, people who are clairvoyant, or in some cases psychics, are able to see this layer, but to the naked eye, it's invisible. The good news is that even though it's invisible, you can still see the trace it leaves behind when you actually start to manipulate it in avatar therapy. As a true healer, you will have to scientifically prove this to yourself, and I will help you do just that. For the sake of simplicity, for the purpose of this course, just this course, the avatar has at least 3 distinct functions. One is to provide a skeleton, a scaffolding, or a matrix for the physical body. Second is to nourish and rejuvenate the physical body, especially at nights when the physical body falls asleep. And third, to provide centers and channels for the flow of the life force within the physical body. This provides the body with means of growth, reproduction, and nutrition. It is this life force that animates the physical body. Without this life force, the physical body is nothing but a lifeless corpse. This is exactly what happens when someone dies. The life force withdraws, and what you're left with is nothing but a corpse, a body of gases, liquids, and minerals, which immediately begins to disintegrate and return its lifeless constituents back to Earth. As the life force withdraws, the avatar, the matrix that was holding the physical body intact, the archetype that was giving it shape and form, begins to decay and disintegrate and soon disappear, even before the physical body turns into dust. The ancients believed that the avatar contains a number of focal points where the life force and bodily functions come together in order to bring life to the physical body. Some traditions call these focal points chakras. Others may call them dantians. They say that these chakras are connected by subtle channels. In Sanskrit, these channels are called nadis. Others may call them meridians. Although the patterns are different, the concept is the same. They say that the life force or life-giving stuff flows through these channels and vitalizes the physical body. Some call this life force or life-giving stuff chi or prana. In India, the seers were able to manipulate the avatar, the archetype of the body, in order to guide the flow of this life force using a practice called yoga. They used yoga to, number one, reach enlightenment, and number two, bring about a state of health and well-being from the inside out. In the Chinese tradition, this practice was called Tai Chi. In the Persian tradition, they used wrestling. In ancient Greece, they used gymnastics. The wrestling and the gymnastics you see today, by the way, are nothing but modern sports. They have nothing to do with their ancient roots. In the Egyptian, Judeo-Christian, and other occult traditions, these practices were performed by priests in mystery temples. For those of you who are more familiar with esoteric practices, I hope you realize that I just hinted at a very ancient riddle. Okay, let's continue in the next lecture. Okay, we're back. Today, we're going to talk about the other half of the non-physical side of a fourfold human being. As you may know, you can write volumes on these topics, but we can't do that here. For the purpose of this course, we don't have the luxury of spending hours or days or weeks on these topics. We need to focus. Avatar healing or avatar therapy, although extremely effective and important, is a very narrow topic. We need to focus our thoughts and energy on the teachings that bear the most fruit for this course. If you need more details on these topics, be sure to take any one or more of my other courses. So, going up the ladder, hypothetically, if you will, the next member of the fourfold human constitution is the soul, or the werewolf. Now, you know, I hope, that there is really no ladder, that there is no up or down when it comes to these inseparable elements. They all exist and interpenetrate each other at the same time and in the same space in the physical body. In a human being, the soul is the layer that experiences sensations like happiness, pain, anger, lust, fear, and so on. It's the human instrument, if you will, for the experience of pain and pleasure. This layer is what the ancients used to call the astral body. The dictionary defines it as a subtle counterpart of the physical human body, accompanying but not usually separated from it in life, and actually surviving its death. The ancients believed that when the entire world fell asleep at night, the seers and sages were able to use this inseparable element, the astral body, in order to travel to the stars and gather wisdom. In this lecture series, I call this layer the werewolf, and the reason will become increasingly clear as we go forward. The werewolf is the seat of your passions, instincts, and desires. It's that inner monster that violently declares itself when we reach puberty. When it's turned loose, the body visibly changes. The male voice becomes deeper. We start having noticeable mood swings. We are flooded with a storm of emotions. Can you guess what age that would normally be? For the first time in her life, a human being begins to feel independent and separate from the world out there. Once the true essence of the werewolf awakens within, the inner trials and tribulations begin. Internal emotions face real-world challenges, and the individual needs to gain mastery over her primitive instincts and emotions, or face a lifetime of defeat and agony. Even though they're crucial and necessary for life, emotions, instincts, passions, and desires are life-consuming, life-eroding processes that chew away at the core of the physical body. By nature, they cause a lot of internal stress. Stress has a devastating effect on the cells and tissues of the body. It simply destroys them. This is a natural process. Our bodies naturally undergo a constant state of production, maintenance, and destruction, 24 hours a day, from the day we were born until the day we die. Literally, every second of every day, our bodies destroy cells, regenerate new ones, and maintain a system of checks and balances that keep our bodies functioning at optimal levels. In biological terms, this is called homeostasis. Grossly speaking, the avatar helps with the activities of nourishment, growth, and regeneration, while the werewolf is responsible for the phase of destruction. The interaction between these two is what creates the state of equilibrium or homeostasis in the body. This yin and yang is what makes you conscious of yourself and your environment. Without this interaction, the interaction between the werewolf and the avatar, you are nothing but a vegetable. You are not self-conscious. Get it? Disease and disharmony often occur not because of damage to the cells and tissues, but because of an imbalance in the faithful process of this production, maintenance, and destruction cycle. For reasons that are beyond the scope of this course, when a disease becomes chronic, the imbalance and disharmony that have come about are often caused by an abnormal activity of one or both of these two human elements, the werewolf and the avatar. For example, if the avatar is hypoactive, if it's not very active for some reason, then you may see weakness and frailty. You get colds all the time. You are prone to disease. On the other hand, if it's hyperactive, then you may have abnormal cell growth and reproduction and end up with certain forms of cancer. When the werewolf is hypoactive, then you may end up with depression and a sedentary lifestyle. This may lead to obesity and diseases that come with it, like heart disease or diabetes. If it's hyperactive, you may develop mania, or you may abnormally generate a lot of stress, mindlessly running after your desires and passions. Stress may ultimately lead to uncontrolled tissue damage and organ disease. Does that make sense? These findings and manifestations are not absolute. There may be so many different combinations among all four members. These are just examples to help you better understand the dynamics that may be involved in the fourfold human constitution. This is what traditional medicine will still have to figure out in the future. As I said, normally, aside from maintaining the physical human archetype, the avatar works hard to nourish and nurture the physical body from the inside out. It works to nourish the body by permeating it with the universal, vital life force. In a young, healthy individual, this life force is flawlessly guided through the focal points or chakras and the subtle channels or nadis. When we sleep at night, the avatar works on permeating the body with this life-giving spring of the vital life force. This helps repair and renew our damaged tissues and cells. In the morning, we start out full of energy, but then our energy starts to dwindle. By the end of the day, we feel exhausted. That's because the werewolf is hard at work to experience its relentless instincts, passions, hopes, and desires. This, as you recall, causes stress, destroys tissue, and makes you feel a strong urge to go back to sleep. When you are asleep, the werewolf falls in the realm of the unconscious, and the avatar is once again allowed the opportunity to help you bathe in this stream of life-giving force. The final member of the fourfold human being is the mind. It's also known as the ego or the higher self. As I said, in this lecture series, I call it the demigod. In the English language, the name of this higher self or ego or demigod is encoded in just one letter, the letter I. No one in this world can call me I. Only I can call myself I. This I, this demigod, gives me the ability to do at least 5 things here on earth. One is to consciously experience myself as a self-contained individual, one who is separate from the world out there. Second is to be able to consciously think, imagine, and create. Third is to have useful memory. Fourth is to experience useful speech. And fifth is to discriminate, to distinguish right from wrong. No other creature on earth has this privilege. That's why humans are the crown jewel of creation. We can think, imagine, and create beyond our seeming capabilities. We can choose to be good or to do harm, not by some inherent ability, but by choice. No other being on earth is capable of these feats. Animals and other visible living creatures on earth are able to cause harm, not by choice, but by acting on instincts, as good or as horrifying as these instincts may be. Likewise, they cannot imagine and create something new the way we do. They can only create according to the capabilities they were endowed with at birth. The demigod has a crucial role in the process of avatar therapy, which involves imagination, meditation, and concentration. We will discuss these avatar therapy techniques in more detail in the coming lectures. Okay, on to the next lecture. Welcome back. So, what are we? For those of you with a science background, like engineers, biologists, physicists, or doctors like me. If you haven't figured it out by now, let me break the news to you. Humans did not just happen by accident. Nothing in this cosmos is an accident. In the beginning of time, the first step in the process of creation of a human being was to prepare the human form, the physical body. Yes, as strange as this may sound, someone or a thing had to do it. Of course, the physical body that was created in the beginning of time had nothing to do with the physical body you see today. If you were somehow transported in time and had the opportunity to examine man's first beginnings, you would not even be able to see the physical body with the naked eye you possess today. In fact, you could not see anything at all. There was nothing but a vibration, a force. The human being of that time and place was nothing but perhaps, if you could imagine, a note in the musical scale, in that all-embracing vibrational state. The human body of that time and space was invisible, just the same way oxygen and nitrogen are invisible, but still have physical properties. This human form had no life. There was no avatar. Neither did it have a soul or a werewolf. The next member of the human constitution, the avatar, did not even come into existence until perhaps eons later, followed by the werewolf eons after that. And then the demigod, which is only a recent phenomenon, relatively speaking, that is. Judging from this description, then, you can see how the physical body is the oldest and the most perfect member of a fourfold human being, while the demigod is the newest and the least developed. The interesting part is that even though the physical body is the oldest and most perfect, it also happens to be the most inert, the most dormant, and unreactive of all four members. In other words, it takes time for your body to change, if any at all. Sometimes days, weeks, months, or years. And even then, within very narrow limits. Maybe you can gain or lose weight or build muscles, but it's very difficult to change your shape or form beyond certain limits, right? Isn't it? You can't just naturally make yourself grow tall or shrink, for example. Can you? On the other hand, the other members of the fourfold human being are constantly changing. They constantly shift and shape throughout the day, but the outcome of this shifting and shaping is often transient, unless you know how to guide it the way a true master does. Over time, however, our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs do tend to affect a noticeable change in the physical body. But this change does not even become evident until years or even decades later. One good example would be that of a childhood memory of an accident or trauma that may turn into medical problems like issues with digestion or diseases like diabetes or heart disease, or even cancer in later years. One thing you should know is that an injury or disease is never just a physical phenomenon. When a physical compromise takes place, the injury or disease is never one-sided. In almost all cases, it often involves at least one or more of the other members of the fourfold human constitution. So as a healer, you'll need to know what it is you're healing. There's no other way. If you're not sure what it is you're healing, then you are obviously doing things blindly. And when this happens, the results are often a hit or miss. Get it? Okay, let's examine the cause of a disease from an energy healer's point of view. Let's go. Hey, here we go. In order for you to heal someone, it would be a good idea to have a basic understanding of how a disease or discomfort comes about, don't you think? Let's discover the mechanism of a disease. Grossly speaking, there are at least two ways one can get sick, right? One is internal, or an illness from within, and the other is external, or from without. What do I mean by that? Well, let's start with external mechanisms. The most obvious external mechanism would be the aftermath of an accident, right? You can fall and break a leg, for example, or you can have a car or bike accident and sustain a major injury. You can have a knife injury, a bullet wound, and so on, right? Another mechanism would be the aftermath of exposure to toxins like stings, bites, drugs, prescription or not, chemical substances, radiation, or carcinogenic stuff. A third would be from infections, an invasion of microscopic creatures like bacteria, viruses, fungi, or even small creatures like worms. In all these cases, the physical body is almost always the first layer to get injured, right? Along with the physical body, the avatar also gets disturbed. And as a result, the flow of the life force gets disrupted after the injury takes place. Would you say that seems logical? The pain that often ensues is the sensation that's felt by the werewolf or the astral body. And if or when things get chronic, it's the demigod that gets involved and falls into this entanglement. The truth is that these layers are not separable and there's no step-by-step order. But this depiction should give you a good kindergarten level understanding of what actually takes place and how the different layers of the fourfold human being are involved. It should also give you a good idea of how and when to start your energy healing therapy. We'll discuss that a bit later. The other category would belong to the diseases that occur internally, right? Like diabetes, heart disease, cancers, or autoimmune disorders. Some of these diseases may be genetic. In other words, they are gifts from your line of inheritance. Depending on the circumstances, these genes may or may not get triggered in one's life. Others may be congenital, meaning there was a defect sometime between conception and birth, and you were born with them. Other than these, in most cases, the problem usually lies with either an underexpression or overexpression of a life process. You remember? We talked about this earlier, didn't we? We said how an either underactivity or overactivity of the avatar or the werewolf can cause discomfort and disease. Remember? This could either happen systemically, meaning that it could involve the entire body, or just a body part or organ. Earlier in this lecture series, I said how, grossly speaking, the avatar is responsible for nourishment, reproduction, and growth, right? I also said that the werewolf destroys tissue by blindingly driving you to follow your instincts, by making you reach for the stars, by pushing you to pursue your dreams, passions, and ambitions. Remember? Like a swinging pendulum, these two layers tend to balance each other out in order to bring about a harmonious state of health and well-being in the physical body. But when this balance, when the swing of this pendulum is tipped to either side for any reason, disease and discomfort begins to surface. Does that make sense? Look at it this way. As you know by now, the avatar serves as a conduit for the flow of the life force, right? If the normal activity of this layer, this sheath, is compromised, for example, for any reason, then the flow of the life force can get buckled or disrupted. If this disruption is not corrected, then the physical body may experience frailty and weakness, or alternatively, an abnormal growth or cancerous tendency. Similarly, if the activity of the werewolf, the destroyer of the human tissue, is compromised for any reason, then it either overpowers the avatar or becomes dominated by it. Either way, the result is discomfort and disease. An adept practitioner of holistic medicine can often track the origin of these diseases back to any one or more of these layers and use herbs, metals, or minerals to help counteract the overactivity or underactivity of these sheaths. This will help bring these layers back into harmony with each other, and as a result, reestablish the perfect state of health and well-being in the patient. This discussion, however, is far beyond the scope of this course. I just wanted you to have a better understanding of the overall mechanism of health and disease and how the interplay of these two human elements, the werewolf and the avatar, affects the physical body. In energy healing or avatar therapy, as an adept healer, you are mainly dealing with the avatar. You are helping with the flow of the life force. You're not dealing with drugs or other healing substances. This I will teach you in a step-by-step fashion. Let's move on to the next lecture. Okay, things are just beginning to get interesting now, aren't they? So, as an avatar healer, you'll need to be able to define the tools of your trade. As you know, every profession has its own set of tools. Without tools, you can't get much done. That's just how it works. That's how humans were able to consistently advance throughout the ages. In the beginning, our tools consisted of wind, sun, water, including rain, wood, and rocks. These were as if God-given tools that allowed us to live and accomplish our tasks. But wait, that's not all. We also had other tools, tools that we no longer readily have access to in today's modern world. Contrary to what today's scientists believe, early humans had access to many of the forces that we falsely believe were discovered only recently. Early humans could readily generate fire. They could manipulate electricity and take advantage of magnetism and the life force. These are bold statements, but they are true. Humans, in a time far beyond the vision or understanding of today's scientists, possessed inherent skills and capabilities that are considered incredible and extraordinary by today's standards. They had inherent powers that by far stretched beyond our wildest imaginations. For example, these primeval humans had much less rigid bodies. They could shrink or stretch their physical bodies at will, hop extraordinary distances, and live in conditions that were extremely unfavorable or even lethal by today's standards. You can still read about these characteristics in myths and legends, including those of giants, dwarfs, and half-animal demigods who held up the skies, created volcanoes, and sparked lightning across the heavens. The tales of the Indian gods, the Egyptian gods, the Nordic myths and legends, and the Greek gods all point to what these cultures considered to be historical accounts of their ancient ancestors. And no, these cultures were not childish or stupid. Today, in our intellectually sophisticated world, with our modern way of thinking, we falsely believe that these ancients were primitive and stupid, and that this world has never witnessed a race more advanced than ours. But in reality, this is far from the truth. Our planet has witnessed far more advanced civilizations with much greater capabilities than ours. One characteristic feature and element of nature is its pendulum-like back and forth swing of conditions and events. There's a constant pivot of forces, like a seesaw, from one side to the other. And the advancement of humanity here on this planet is no exception. You can clearly see this in the alternation of night and day, the seasons, the cycle of birth and death, and the cyclic movement of the stars and galaxies across the heavens. There's always an oscillating movement, a going back and forth that underlies the characteristic feature of our world, of nature. And the swinging pendulum of human advancement and progress is a great example of this fundamental feature of nature. So the question is, have humans gone through this before? Are we just repeating the same thing over and over again? The answer is no. So what's changed? One of the characteristic laws of this universe is that it expands. As it expands, so does the knowledge and wisdom of the cosmos. Even though there is an oscillating, a pendulum-like movement back and forth, there's always a move or leap forward as we advance through time. At this stage in our human evolution, this expansion, this leap forward is focused on the growth and evolution of the higher self, or the demigod. There was a time in a far, far distant past when the human race was in the process of developing the physical body. Yes, there was a time when the physical body was not perfect the way it is now. Epochs later, it started working on its avatar, and then later yet, it began working on developing its werewolf. We are now actively working on developing the demigod. Do you remember the role of the demigod from our earlier lectures? Demigod is the fourth and the youngest member of the fourfold human constitution. Isn't it? Didn't we already talk about this? It's the least developed sheep or member of the human makeup and organization, right? Its job is to help us to become creative beings, to create from scratch, to discriminate between good and bad, right and wrong. The demigod is the humanity's newly developed instrument of intellect, relatively speaking, of course. We are becoming more intellectual. So what has changed, or what's changing, is that we are developing our faculty of intellect. We're becoming intellectual beings. We're evolving with a much more conscious clarity of ourselves and our environment. We are much more intellectual, much more conscious, and much more analytical than our ancient ancestors. The ancients were able to develop truly advanced civilizations. Atlantis was a great example of one of those advanced civilizations. But these ancients lived in a more or less dreamy state of consciousness. They had all these extraordinary powers, the ability to access the life force and so on. But these powers were not acquired the way we acquired our knowledge and capabilities. They were not acquired through strife or trial and error. They were not acquired the way we acquired our ability to use electricity, steam, and electromagnetic forces. These abilities were not acquired using their intellect because their power of intellect was not nearly as developed. Almost all of their abilities were, if I could dare to say, God-given talents. They were not acquired Does that make sense? This is precisely why their descendants were not able to retain those powers, those abilities, after major catastrophes like the floods. The abilities and the knowledge of their bygone era were all lost in the abyss of time. Have you ever wondered why, even though the ancients had no physicians in today's modern sense, humans were able to not only survive, but also thrive throughout the ages? That's because they had access to these inherent forces. They had a form of clairvoyance, if I could call it that, which allowed them to not only see this life force, but also use it to heal themselves. In time, almost all their knowledge and all their capabilities were gradually lost. They were lost for a reason, though. They were lost in order for us to learn to acquire them through our intellect and eventually retain them, not as a God-given right, but as a jewel of our effort and conscious achievements. Get it? Conscious achievements. As the ability to work with the life force waned among men, people looked to the tribal elders and chieftains for help and advice. Because some of these elders and chiefs still retained a remnant of these powers and could actually help heal their people. Little by little, though, as time went by, subsequent generations of elders gradually lost this knowledge too. Eventually, as you could imagine, charlatanry began to flourish. In the centuries that preceded ours, especially in the Renaissance era, this work of healing was passed on in a muted form to barbers and butchers, who rarely had a glimpse of the truth. They could at best reposition broken bones or provide suction cups or herbs or potions for fevers and maladies. Today's modern humanity has lost this knowledge for a good reason. It has lost this ability to see and use the life force at will, but instead it has gained a much more precious faculty. That's the power of intellect. In fact, an ancient, with all his extraordinary powers and capabilities, would be in awe and wonder at the magnificence of the human ingenuity and intellect if he were to live here among us today. So now that you know a little history, let's focus on what the life force actually is and does. What is this life force? Contrary to what people imagine, life force is not the same thing as life energy. People often use the word force and energy interchangeably, but these two words are not the same. Life energy is a plant or animal or human's capacity to do work. I only have so much life energy stored inside me, right? After a hard workout, or at the end of the day, my life energy is almost depleted. I will die if I don't replenish my cells and tissues with this energy. Does that make sense? Sound reasonable? How do I replenish this life energy? Two obvious examples are food and sleep, right? Do you agree? It's a very complicated theory, but when you explain it in this sense, it's very simple to understand, isn't it? But the life force is quite a different beast. Life force is not the same thing as energy. It's an influence. It animates lifeless matter. Life energy gives us the capacity to do work, but the life force brings lifeless matter to life. No one remembers how it works anymore, but that's what it does. Is that clear? Life force is the alchemy of life, growth, and reproduction. Those who have full access to this knowledge, to this alchemy, can create a living being that can function, grow, and reproduce. They can create a plant, an animal, or even a human being. Yes, this knowledge is sacred. A time will come, a time far, far in the future, when humans will be able to create living plants, not by planting seeds, but, if I may say, by breathing life into it. In a time even much farther than that, when humans have aligned their moral values much closer to those of our creators, we will be able to create animals, and someday even humans. Until then, there will be many wars and many natural disasters. Humans will be at the brink of extinction many times over before such miracles can begin to happen. In fact, by that time, we will have outgrown our planet, our globe, our Earth. Our Earth will no longer even exist by then. The ancients had a somewhat abbreviated knowledge of this alchemy, but even this abbreviated knowledge is now lost. Again, for a good reason. It's lost because it was never ours. The human race had never really worked for it. It was a gift. As you know, gifts are never for you to keep. This is the lot of humanity. You need to work for anything that has intrinsic value, anything that's worthwhile. You need to achieve it, conquer it, and dominate it. If you don't, you will wake up one day and it's no longer there. Does that make sense? The knowledge of the use of this life force was made available to us at a time when we needed it most. But with our well-developed intellect, we can now do things on our own. And having such sacred knowledge readily available to us in this day and age can literally spell disaster. Don't you see what we do to ourselves already in the name of industry, politics, war, and peace? How we destroy ourselves and our planet. How we rob it of its natural resources. Given our immoral and unethical tendencies, can you imagine what we could do if we had access to this life force today? As I said, we will eventually have access to it in a time far, far in the future. But the preparations are being made right now. A small group of dedicated individuals are coming together, not from a certain region like India or Tibet, but all around the world, to form this nucleus for this movement. And as an avatar therapy healer, you can be one of the pioneers that will help shape the future in that direction. As in every land, every society, and every school here on Earth, there are always individuals who are pioneers, those who blaze the trail and reach for the stars. You can also always find a few who lag behind. Laggards, they're called, who never catch up and always trail behind, right? In fact, as a whole, the human race itself is comprised of the same makeup and character. We always have a small percentage who are pioneers and a portion who are laggards, who have fallen behind, right? That's just how things work, isn't it? The point I want to make here is that we have laggards who still have that remnant clairvoyance, that remnant capacity to work with the life force. Many of them function as healers or medicine men in tribes in remote parts of our planet. Others quietly weave in and out of our cities in civilized nations. These people, although very small in number, still possess a remnant of those healing powers, but they have nothing to contribute to the nucleus of this future humanity when it comes to these powers, because their capabilities are still a gift. They did nothing to develop these powers. They just woke up one day and incidentally realized that they have these powers. You, on the other hand, as an avatar therapist, can be a part of this movement, this nucleus. You can help shape the future of humanity. But in order for you to do this, you need to work hard. You need to work to develop your dormant powers. In all likelihood, you will not be able to create life in this lifetime. You will not be able to create a plant. But you can learn to work with the life force and guide it within the human body in a way that will bring about a healing state of health and well-being. That's what we're going to cover in avatar therapy. For some of you, it may take days, weeks, or months to see results. For others, years. And still for some, a lifetime or more. Everybody's different. But if you want to make a change, you need to start here and now. This is not a same-day mastery course. No matter how quick or smart or genius you are, you will never master these powers overnight. But if you try hard, you will not only become proficient, but also retain your powers and add to them in future epochs and lifetimes. Does that make sense? So let's continue with more instructions. Sure. Back again. Welcome. I certainly hope what you're taking away from this course is much more than you bargained for so far. Now let's continue. To recap, so far I've said that humans are spiritual beings. They're not physical, they're spiritual. The physical body is a temporary expression of the spirit, right? I also said that a human being is covered with an earthly suit, an earthly covering, which is composed of 4 inseparable elements that come together and work in harmony with each other in order for us to experience life here on Earth. These coverings are the physical body, the avatar, the werewolf, and the demigod. I said that the first 2 elements are made up of earthly stuff, physical matter, with the physical body being the grossly visible part and the avatar being ethereal, if I may say, the invisible counterpart. I also said that the werewolf and the demigod are the spiritual, invisible, non-physical elements of the fourfold human constitution. In avatar therapy, as the name implies, the focus of therapy is on the avatar, the archetype that, as I said, nourishes and sustains the physical body, right? It does this by providing a matrix for the flow of the life force, correct? If you recall from my earlier lectures, the avatar is the human element that is responsible for nourishment, growth, and reproduction, correct? So far, so good? All right. So again, what are we treating? The answer is the avatar. Why are we treating the avatar? To restore the flow of the life force so that we can once again achieve a state of health and well-being. Once again, here are a few questions to help you more specifically hone in on our objective. Number 1, specifically, what element or elements are we directly treating in avatar therapy? Of course, the avatar, right? And number 2, what does treating the avatar do? It restores the free and natural flow of the life force, or prana, or chi, through the body, right? When there's a physical or emotional injury, you almost always find a corresponding defect in the makeup and form of the avatar. This defect impedes or sometimes even blocks the flow of the life force through that region. By restoring the form, you will slowly help restore that flow and speed up the process of healing. This restores the harmony that was lost between the matrix and the life force, right? For example, when you take a fall and break a bone, you sustain an injury, not only in the physical body, but also in its archetype, the avatar. To add to that, the pain that follows the injury is in the domain of the werewolf. And the remorse and regret that come with it are in the sphere of the demigod. Does that make sense? So the whole chain gets affected. And if nothing is done, this ease or discomfort tends to become troubling or even chronic. The entire system falls out of balance, and a sense of disharmony eventually emerges. If you break your arm, for example, and do nothing, you may have a deformity around the area, or the two bone ends fuse. This deformity will also change the flow of the life force forever. Depending on the nature of the deformity, on one end of the spectrum, the consequences may be insignificant. On the other end, however, they may be life-changing, with lifelong chronic pain and morbidity. If you go to the surgeon, however, you can get the bones put back together properly. Eventually, the avatar follows suit. The pain slowly subsides, and the body gets restored back to its near normal state in just a few weeks or months. When you heal using avatar therapy, you speed up the process. You begin to restore the archetype, the avatar, right away. This restores the flow of the life force while the surgeon is working on the physical body. This speeds up the process of relief and recovery significantly. Does that make sense? Alternatively, when the physical or emotional compromise is an old injury and the flow of the life force has been altered or impeded for a long time, in other words, when the disease has become chronic, chances are the avatar, the archetype of the physical body, has a block or deformity. By removing the deformity or impediment in the avatar, using the techniques you learn in this course, you can restore the flow of the life force and remove the dis-ease or malady. Does this all make sense? Okay, let's continue in the next lecture. Hey, welcome back. Let's dive right in. By now, after all these preparatory lectures we've gone through so far, there should be absolutely no ambiguity about what it is we're treating in avatar therapy, right? We are treating the avatar, correct? So far, so good? We also know why we're treating the avatar, right? To restore the free and natural flow of the life force, or chi, or prana. Agree? We also know what the ultimate purpose of this treatment modality is, don't we? What is it? What's the ultimate purpose of applying this mode of therapy? Why avatar therapy? The answer is, number one, to speed up the process of healing. And number two, to achieve a vibrant state of health and well-being by restoring the balance and harmony that was lost in the body, right? In effect, we're recreating a natural state of health and well-being by restoring the flow of the life force within the matrix. Are we all in agreement? Great. So now, here's the next question. How do we go about doing this? What does avatar therapy entail? There are two components. The first works on the avatar, and the second deals with the life force. The first component in avatar therapy is called immersion. In immersion, we mentally remove the blemish or injury. In effect, we mentally restore the archetype of the physical body, the avatar, back to its normal shape and form. The second component is called psychokinetics. In psychokinetics, we restore the free and natural flow of the life force through the area that's injured or compromised. Let's begin with the avatar. Again, how do we restore the damaged area back to its normal shape or form? The answer is immersion. There are 2 steps in the process of immersion. Number 1, visualization. And number 2, concentration. Let's start with the first step. The first step in the process of restoring the matrix is visualization. You need to visualize the perfect archetype, the perfect matrix. We said that the avatar is like a molding, right? It's a scaffolding, a form that provides a map, a blueprint, if I may say, for channels or nadis and vortices or chakras, right? These channels and vortices or nadis and chakras provide the means for the flow of the life force through the physical body, correct? You follow me? By bathing in the stream of this life force, the tissues and organs of the body are vitalized. They come to life. The cells come to life. They regenerate, grow, and reproduce themselves. The way the cells, organs, and tissues of a plant bathe in the sap. So the idea is to restore the shape and form of the avatar so that the life force can naturally flow through it, free and clear of all obstructions. Does that make sense? So how do we do this? Let's begin with the process of visualization. First of all, what are we supposed to visualize? We visualize the ailing body or body part as if it's perfect. You don't need to know any anatomy or physiology. You just imagine a body or body part as if it's perfect in your mind's eye. Here's how. You begin by overlooking the blemish, the defect, or the deformity in the body and imagining it in your mind's eye as if it's already perfect. Invoking this form of imagination immediately begins to work on the patient's ailing body or body part. This is a crucial step in the art of avatar therapy. Without this invocation, navigating the therapy is impossible. So don't take it lightly. If you recall from my earlier lectures, we said that human beings are born with 3 inherent powers, and that the entire scope of accomplishments of the human race lies in the use of these powers. These powers are the power of thought, the power of emotions, and the power of volition, or the willpower. Correct? To say it more bluntly, humans produce thoughts, feelings, and willpower. These 3 human attributes provide a window for us to live here on Earth and create, to be creative, to make tables, chairs, boats, cars, spaceships, to discover the laws of nature and to use them to our advantage. It's with these powers that we visualize the perfect archetype, the perfect avatar. But you can't stop there. This is only the first step, right? The next step in the process of immersion is to concentrate with all your might, with all your power, and hold that image, that perfect image of that perfect body or body part in your mind's eye. You can't let this image slip away. Visualizing alone is practically useless. You need to hold on to that image in your mind's eye and remain steadfast in that vision, regardless of what you see at the moment. Does that make sense? You need to visualize the perfect avatar and hold on to that mental image with all your might. You hold on to it and gaze at it as if you're gazing at an object without blinking for the entire therapy session. Is that clear? You must concentrate on your objective for the entire session. Even if the disease-ravaged body you're working on looks meek and vulnerable, you need to know that you have the power to heal it. You need to hold on to that inner conviction. You need to hold on to that inner truth. You have the gift. You just need to use it. You need to apply it. You have the inherent power to do it. Just like an athlete, you need to build your mental muscles and become strong enough to do it. That's how you can move mountains. That's how you can succeed in the natural art of healing. That's how you become a beacon of light in an ocean of pain and suffering, where people would do anything and everything to find you and seek your help and expertise. The second part of the equation in the process of immersion is to restore the natural flow of the life force through the area that was compromised. You do this by using psychokinetic exercises. We'll delve into this topic in more detail. But first, you need to make sure you understand these concepts now before you move on to the next lecture. What's important to understand in this section is that you will never accomplish anything as far as healing goes without developing a titanic inner conviction. This is not a passive course. You cannot just read and memorize a bunch of rules and algorithms and then apply them the way you do in a computer course. Instead, you need to apply yourself. This is not easy. It's hard work. But when you've mastered it, you'll know it was worth every bit of pain and suffering you endured in order to achieve it. All right. We meet again. A true pleasure to have you back. So what is psychokinetics? It's the ability of a person to influence a physical system using his or her mind. Let me say it again. It's your ability to influence something using nothing but your thoughts. It sounds vague, but it's simple. For example, if you focus on the palm of your hand long enough and think warmth, 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 if you put all your might into it, you'll see that in a relatively short time, your hands will feel quite warm. No big deal, right? What's more interesting is that if you've developed your mental muscles well enough, you can ask people what they feel when they touch your hands. And they will tell you that your hands feel surprisingly warm. This is your chi, your life force. I'm not talking about the warmth, but the inherent force within you that can be directed and guided in order to cause warmth. Get it? And as interesting as this may seem, this is really not an extraordinary feat. Almost everyone can do this. Don't you agree? But there are still people in this world, laggards. You remember how we talked about laggards? There are still a small number of laggards who inherently possess a remnant of that old psychic power which belonged to ancient humanity. These people can still do extraordinary things. They can create enough potential at their fingertips, for example, to transmit a strong electric shock to someone if they touch them. They can use their life force to affect physical objects. They can move a pencil, for example, or make a pile of newspaper catch fire just by using their inner force, their inner chi. Not too long ago, this was considered to be pure charlatanry, a trick or a silly superstition, but not anymore. Science is now coming to grips with the fact that your mind can actually influence a physical system. And this system does not necessarily have to be your own body. In other words, you can use your mind to reach and influence something outside of your body. There are companies like Neuralink and Synchron that are trying to find ways to do just that. They're trying to help people with spinal cord injury to regain their independence by giving them the ability to control computers and mobile devices directly with their minds, with their thoughts. You remember? Thinking is one of the 3 attributes of a human being, right? In this section, we'll learn how to use the power of thinking to influence the life force. You'll learn a couple of techniques to help you guide the life force, to mobilize the chi or prana within you. Eventually, you'll learn how to influence the flow of this life force in your patient's body, with their consent, of course. But in order to become an adept healer, you'll need to mobilize this life force within your own body first. You'll need to experience this work of mobilization firsthand for yourself before you can learn to apply it on others. Otherwise, it will be like a blind leading the blind, right? So how do you do it? As you know, this work of mobilization of the life force is not a new concept by any means. Humans have done this for thousands of years. It's only in the recent era, especially since the 15th century onward, that the knowledge has almost completely faded away. Let me give you a little background. In ancient India, yogis practiced yoga to mobilize their prana, using different exercises like yogic breathing or asanas or body movements and postures. Later, the chi was mobilized using techniques like Tai Chi. Persians used the technique called wrestling. Egyptians used occult techniques in mystery temples, and the Greeks used gymnastics. In each culture, a different method was introduced because the constitution of the human body kept changing from one era to another. But the concept has always remained the same. Now, the question is, why did they try so hard to mobilize the life force, or prana, or chi? Because this mobilization loosened the grip between the physical body and the avatar. This is an important concept. Don't just sit through it passively. This is important. Now, what did this loosening accomplish? Unlike today's modern man, ancients had a much better understanding of man's true inner nature. They somehow knew that by loosening the grip between the avatar and the physical body, they can, number one, ascend and realize the divine within. They could reach what may, in today's terms, be called cosmic consciousness. In Sanskrit, this state was called samadhi. And number two, bring about a perfect state of health and well-being from the inside out. Today, I will teach you a couple of techniques to help you loosen the grip between these two elements, these two sheaths of the fourfold human constitution, between the physical body and the avatar. This loosening, this unsettling of the grip between these two sheaths, contrary to what you may think, will actually help you bring about a natural state of health and well-being from the inside out. In the beginning, you'll be experimenting on yourself. You'll need to get the kinks out and know that you can successfully accomplish this. Once you've mastered these concepts, you can begin to work on your patients. Now remember, this course is about healing. So the techniques we'll primarily work on in this setting are for the purpose of healing and nothing else. Now, I said that the ancients in different eras used different techniques. Why? Because the relationship between the four separate elements of the fourfold human constitution was different in different epochs. And the leaders of those epochs had to choose different techniques in order to accomplish that same task. In today's modern era, for the most part, those techniques, the breathing techniques, the Tai Chi, the wrestling, and the gymnastics are no longer suitable for the modern man for this purpose. Once again, you recall how I said that in every epoch, there are always those who are pioneers, those who just coast through life in line with the rest of the general population, or the majority, and those who are laggards in every region and every country. Laggards whose bodily constitution is still in line with those of the ancients, right? So you can always find people who are primarily an exception to the rule. But for the most part, those ancient techniques no longer work properly for the modern man. For example, today, activities like yoga or wrestling or gymnastics are pretty much taught just about everywhere, in every major city around the world. You can learn all sorts of fancy breathing exercises, but you won't be able to achieve the desired results. Why? Because these techniques are no longer suitable for the average modern man. Very simple. Is that clear? So having said that, let's start with a simple technique. Remember, in the beginning, you'll need to start working on yourself. You'll need to do it long enough to know that it works on you before you can begin to treat others. If you don't, you will fail and lose your credibility. Not only that, but more importantly, do you remember taking an oath earlier in this lecture series? If you start working on others prematurely, if you don't work on yourself long enough to have the conviction that it works with every fiber of your being, you are probably not only fooling yourself, but you're also causing harm. All right? Am I clear? Okay, enough said. The first exercise is called the downward glide. In this exercise, I want you to lie down and close your eyes. If you're watching this course, do it with the video or audio running. Now, I want you to concentrate on the highest point on your skull. Take a few minutes to feel the presence of that point, that summit in your body. Now imagine a bright point of white light right there, right at the top of your skull. Let the light grow in size. Imagine that this point of light is charged with a tremendous amount of dynamic, life-giving energy. Now I want you to let this focal point, this point of light and energy loose. Let it loose. Let it run through your body in every direction, up and down, back and forth, sideways and diagonally. Let it run wild in each and every possible way imaginable. Do this for about 30 seconds and then stop. Do it. I will wait 30 seconds. Now bring this focal point, the concentrated point of light, back to the same place we started with, on top of your skull. And this time, let's control it in an orderly fashion. Take a moment to build momentum. Let it glide down and penetrate every fiber of your body, from head to toe. Then release it at the toe. Let it disappear. Let it dissolve into your tissues. Remember Beam Me Up Scotty from Star Trek? Again, start from the top and work it down to the toe. Repeat this orderly flow from the head to the toe, and then start back from the top again, over and over, at least 10 times. I will pause for a moment until you're done. Once you're done, sit back up and tell me what you think. You can tell me about it in the next assignment if you're watching the video course. Now let's move on to the next exercise. The second exercise is called the loop. This is very easy because it's practically the same exercise as the glide. But this time, you don't let the light disappear at your toes. You just glide it the opposite direction, back to the top. Get it? You feel it penetrate every fiber of your body, again as it travels back to the top. In effect, you're creating a closed circuit, per se. In other words, you let it oscillate up and down. You just let this oscillating beam of light penetrate your body as you glide it, as you guide it back and forth from head to the toe, and then loop it back to the top, back and forth, back and forth. You basically create a loop, right? Again, do this 10 times. I will pause for a moment. So far, so good? Easy, right? The next exercise is called the vortex. This is a two-part exercise. In this exercise, you lie down again and close your eyes and imagine that you're literally lying at the center of a vortex of light that is charged with a tremendous amount of dynamic, life-giving energy. As this vortex spins, a flow of light is generated in the center of the vortex, in the center of the tube. If the vortex is spinning clockwise, the light flows down the tube. And when the vortex spins counterclockwise, the light flows up the tube. It's that simple, all right? The only thing is that you are in charge of spinning this vortex. You have complete control. And as a result, you have complete control over the flow of this light, this life force. Now, when you're ready, I want you to lie down, take a moment to imagine this vortex engulfing you. Take a moment to build enough energy and momentum. When you're ready, I want you to start spinning along with this vortex. Spin it clockwise. Feel yourself spinning as you remain safe and secure in the center of this tube, in the center tube of this spinning vortex. As the vortex starts spinning and the light starts flowing down the center of this tube to your feet, feel the life-giving light, the life-giving force penetrate every cell in your body and swoop you away. Imagine experiencing a free-fall sensation. The sensation should feel like this. Remember when you were a child, when you would hold your hands up to your sides and spin? You would spin so much that you would lose your balance and either sit on the ground or fall. But even when you stayed stationary for a few seconds afterwards, you would still feel that spinning sensation, right? That's how you should feel when you do this exercise. Do this mentally for about 20 seconds and then stop. I will pause for you. Now go do it. This is a very powerful exercise. As the current starts flowing, a lot of subtle sensations may be picked up in the process. If you're not used to it, you may feel nauseated. Kind of like the sensation you feel when you have motion sickness. If this happens, you need to start slow and build your strength gradually. The second part of this exercise is just a change in direction. In the first part, the vortex spun clockwise. Now, reverse the direction. Remember, as the direction of the spin is changed, so is the direction of the flow of the light in the tube. It's now flowing from the feet to the head. Again, do this for 20 seconds and stop. Once again, I will pause. All right, do it. Okay, practice these exercises a few times tonight until you feel comfortable with them. And I will see you tomorrow. It takes time to describe it, but the work itself is quite simple, isn't it? The next step in the immersion process is concentration. You've spent time and energy to mentally create a perfect body. You've attached feelings to it, and you've poured your power of will all over it. Now you need to hold that picture steady and fiercely concentrate on it in your mind's eye. If you do it right, this technique alone will create a revolution inside you and your patient. It will create a healthy sense of inner vitality, not but also in you. Impressive, isn't it? Normally, a typical session lasts about 15 minutes or so, and you should use your power of concentration to hold the picture of that perfect arm in your mind's eye for the entire session. This is why, once you start your therapy session, you should avoid any type of distraction. This includes phone calls and conversation. This is serious stuff. And if you want to succeed, you should be serious about what you do. You'll need to build rapport with the patient, but now is not the time to start a conversation. I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, so to recap, in this section, you learned how to practice immersion, right? You form a mental picture of the alien body part as if it's perfectly healthy, a caricature form of it, and then you hold that form, that mental picture, steady in your mind's eye for the entire session, right? One more thing. An adept healer always begins the therapy even before the session starts. That's right. You start your immersion process even before you see the patient. A good practice is to immerse yourself first. You basically find a quiet place and close your eyes. You visualize and concentrate on the perfect image of your client for about 10 to 15 minutes on your own, even before you see the patient. In the sports world, this is called a warm-up. You need to warm up before you see your patient. In the medical world, it's called previewing the patient's chart. Does that make sense? Let me tell you a little story about ancient healers. Healers, as you can imagine, have existed in ability to treat them before they could find relief from their illness. Once the patient was accepted by the healer would invite the patient to his abode. It wasn't unusual for the patient to stay there with the healer for days or even weeks. The healer would cook food and make potions and serve the patient as the guest of honor. All this work and time were needed in order for the healer to get to know the patient. He needed to understand why the patient had invited this disease into his home, into his body, into his inner temple. As the healer gradually got to know the patient, really know the patient, he would begin crafting a doll, a healing doll, which would mimic a dreamlike copy of the perfect physical and spiritual attributes of that patient. Yes, the healer would make a healing doll. And as strange as this may seem to our intellectually analytical minds, the strategy worked. It really worked. You see, what the healer, the medicine man, was actually doing was immersing himself in the patient. Yes, he was doing the immersion. He was concentrating with all of his might, all of his power, and all of his inner force on the patient, on how the patient would actually look like if his body was perfectly healthy. He did this by spending time with him, by eating supper with him, by sleeping in the same area, and by creating that healing doll for him. By the time that doll was completed, he knew that his inner power of visualization and concentration had turned into a colossal force that could actually help heal the patient. The truth is that the medicine man of the old days never really thought about the work of this immersion in terms of visualization and concentration techniques. This is the way we, with our modern intellectually analytical minds, think. We think in terms of visualization and concentration, but those medicine men never viewed their work from an analytical vantage point. You see, they're demigods were not developed enough to think that way. They just received divine inspiration, if I could call it that. They inherently acted on what they felt from within, and in return got extraordinary results. Today, making healing dolls is no longer appropriate for the modern man. Although there are laggards who still practice healing that way, this is no longer effective for the modern human being. Why? Because the modern man of today has a well-developed intellect. In exchange, he no longer receives divine intervention the way the ancients did. Today's modern humanity needs to work for everything. Unlike our ancient ancestors, we need to work intellectually to acquire what they could easily achieve by sitting and meditating. We no longer receive such inspiration. We are now accustomed to using our minds to achieve, conquer, and overcome our challenges. We use our intellect to explore, discover, and learn, to use the laws of the universe to our advantage. If you wish to receive divine inspiration and catch a glimpse of the truth, you need to unfold the forces that are dormant within you. You can do just that by practicing and teaching the exercises that are laid out in this course. This is how you can leap forward and break through the mist that hangs over today's modern day man. One way or another, though, magic and doll making are no longer acceptable or effective for today's intellectual humanity. Does that make so good?